Welcome to the NSCHBC Edge Podcast, leading the way in the business of medicine. Now here's your host, Terry Fletcher.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NSCHBC Edge Podcast. I'm your host, Terry Fletcher. The Edge Podcast is brought to you today by the National Society of Certified Healthcare Business Consultants. Our goal is to discuss healthy business principles, have conversations on the business side of medicine, so that you and your practice can thrive and be profitable and successful for years to come. As many of you know, the NSCHBC is a proactive organization with over 300 members, including legacy members, that share their wealth of knowledge and expertise with each other, whether it be in the legal field, the accounting field, the RCM field, the business management field, value-based care, physician profit centers, and more. We have every kind of consultant that focuses on the healthcare industry that you could want. I'm happy to welcome NSCHBC member and our current NSCHBC president, Shane Pickett. Shane is a healthcare CPA and certified business consultant for Eide Bailly, who helps organizations with tax strategies and tax planning. He also consults on healthcare business operations, which includes buy-in and buy-out of new doctors, as well as real estate investment. He works with individual doctors who are looking for the best tax-saving strategies, and Shane also assists with helping physicians plan for retirement and the future. Hi, Shane. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi. Thanks, Terry, for having me.
Sure. Boy, you have quite the background, and I'm sure some people are thinking, you have a CPA on a podcast? I love to give you guys a hard time about that. And I'm like, yes, I do. It's just fun to have you guys here. So we want to talk about some things that really, it's an interesting topic, and one I actually had it brought to my attention by one of my clients. And it may speak to maybe a smaller practice or, a single provider. It may be a big practice, but a question has been looming that I get every once in a while, and it's basically, does a physician need a CPA in healthcare like yourself, one that focuses on healthcare needs, or do they just need a bookkeeper, with medical practice experience? What do you think?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and one that the NSCHBC has been asking for a long time. And as a CPA, I am a member and a certified member of the NSCHBC. So, I think that a physician does need someone who specializes in their practice and has the ability to talk in the same language as the physician does. And so when you're looking for kind of anybody out there in the market and you're looking for even a physician, you don't go to just a generalist for all types of your problems as a physician. You're going to look for special service, special knowledge. And as someone that specializes in healthcare, I can tell you that there are things that come up with, the physician in their practice where they do need that someone with that additional knowledge that can help them and kind of guide their trajectory. So.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And it's interesting because I'm not a physician, but I am a healthcare consulting firm, and similar to what you guys have, but you're obviously more heavy accounting. And it's interesting because I have a bookkeeper, but I also have a tax consultant. Because in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like bookkeepers, as helpful as they are, not to diminish their role, but they seem to focus more on the day-to-day financial tasks, recording transactions, maybe managing some payroll and basic financial statements, but they don't seem to have the background to give advice like CPAs such as yourself are, and analyzing that financial data and reports.
True.
Do you find that?
Yeah, I do. And what I find is that, when you have a bookkeeper, you have to be careful about, did you hire someone that's just going to record transactions for you? And what I mean by that is, are they just going to take whatever's in your bank account and put it into the QuickBooks Online or something like that, right? So, you went out and you bought a new vehicle, so they put down a down payment, but they never put the loan on the books, or you're making your monthly payments to the bank or to the finance company, and they just record that, and they don't, again, put the loan and separate the interest and principal. And so, you got to be careful with bookkeepers to where, I don't mean to bag on spouses, but a lot of healthcare providers will just have their spouse do it because they know how, or they just want to save some money. But what we find is when we get a set of books to prepare a tax return, it's not the same information that we can use. And you don't want us to use it because you want those deductions of deducting your interest. You want the deduction of your vehicle. And so you have to be careful with just hiring someone to do the bookkeeping. And then the next step, like you mentioned, the consulting side of it. Um, if we don't know, as tax consultants, if we don't know what's kind of happening in your practice and you don't talk to us and you don't give us like, hey, I bought this new vehicle, or hey, I'm thinking about buying this new equipment, we have a hard time giving advice if we don't know what's going on. And so having that consultant and the bookkeeper really kind of work hand in hand. Right now is a great time for year-end tax planning. That's what we're doing with a lot of our clients. And the first thing we ask them is, well, how much net income have you made this year? And if you
Do we ever know
say,
what that answer is?
yeah, yeah. And if you say, oh, I don't know, my books haven't been kept up all year, or you say, oh, well, I'm just closing October as we're into November, I'm just closing October, so let me get those for you. We can't really do anything if we don't have good data, right? And that's
Right.
the key. So I think I like your idea of having a consultant, a tax consultant, and also a bookkeeper, because I don't think they're the same thing. And you need to be talking and communicating to both of them throughout the year. So
Yeah, well, it's so interesting because, like you said, well, my bookkeeper, I love her to death, but very limited in what she does. I give
mhm,
her just information and she puts it in, and
yeah,
basically she does the little tax tasks I don't want to do, like like
yeah,
QuickBooks and payroll and things like that. I'm like, no, that you do it, and filing the 941 and the EDD. I'm in California, so
yeah,
that kind of stuff. But my tax consultant, and for me, unfortunately, he does not have healthcare background, but he's seems to be learning, picking up a lot of healthcare people, and so this is where I think you've got to have just a major expertise for providers. Is your job not just really advising them based on what you get on their financials, but do you also, offer advice unsolicited as far as how to, I'm noticing that you've got a lot of cash on the books. It's time to reinvest that. Or I noticed that,
yeah.
or do they just come to you? And when there's a change, I know you went through, well, you had to go through the nightmare of COVID and all that, dump in the doctor stuff. That was crazy for those, for that money they got for I'm air quoting free, which really wasn't free.
Yeah.
But do you give advice that they don't ask for, or is that expected?
I think it's expected that you give advice not asked for from most clients. The question most clients will have is, do I have to pay for that? So you got to be careful. But
The
no,
answer
I
is
mean,
yes.
yeah, yes, you got to pay for it. But we definitely are giving advice all the time to clients, and it's not just about their individual situation; it's also about the practice, right? So we've got to help the practice make money so that the physician or the owners, maybe there's a few owners, are also making money. They're also saving for retirement. So a lot of times, what we'll talk to them, especially if you're starting out. We don't recommend retirement plans right away because I'm just starting out. I'm still figuring all of this out. I'm figuring out how to do this and trying to make money, and I'm seeing my first patients. But as we work with you after a year or 2 years or however long it takes, we start having the conversation. Okay, what's next for your tax planning, right? What's next for your situation in your life? Which is, a lot of times they'll say, well, should I pay off my student loans or should I save money for retirement? And so we're answering those questions with the physicians and saying, well, here's your tax deduction if you put money into retirement. Here's your tax deduction if you pay off your student loans. One is a good tax deduction, one is zero tax deduction.
Seems
So,
simple.
yeah, and you have to call me to find out which one is which if you don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
So we give that kind of unsolicited advice and say, you know what, we're looking out for you because we know what it's going to take for you to retire. The other part, Terry, is that the the 401k, like a retirement plan, that's typically not enough to get people, physicians who are high income earners, to retirement. They won't have enough money at the end of the day to, retire the way they're living currently.
Yeah.
So we talk to them about profit share plans. And that's a thing of saying, hey, we need you to be putting more money away. And we know from our experience working in healthcare that if you're a physician and you're not putting money in your profit share plan, you're leaving tax dollars on the table because, frankly, I know you can afford it. Right. So that's
Right.
kind of some of that. What you were asking about is, are we looking out for our clients' best interests? And because we work in healthcare, we have a better understanding of where our clients should be, not where they are, but where they should be.
Which is actually that's such a unique position to be in. And you mentioned something before that I wanted to expand on. How does it work when you have a provider that's in a big practice and they come to you to, find out if they want you as their CPA and then they hire you? And but they're in part of a practice that has maybe a corporate CPA company. Is there a conflict there where maybe advice doesn't match? And obviously the one has the interest of the corporation versus the interest of the individual doctor. How does that work?
Yeah, that can be tricky. And as Ide Bailey, we often work with the clinics. We don't have a lot of individual physicians coming to us and saying, "Hey, I work with this clinic over here. Can you help
Oh,
me?"
good. Oh, good.
So that doesn't happen too often, but I have had situations where I'm working with the clinic, and because of maybe it's personalities, maybe it's fees, maybe it's just my brother's a CPA, they go to somebody else. And so we try to work with that other CPA to make sure that nothing is getting lost in translation. Because, the physician just hands over a K1 to their new CPA or their other CPA. And a lot of times with K1s, which is kind of your pass through information, it's your tax packet that you get as being an owner of a practice.
Yeah.
There's a lot of information on that. It can be, with all the new rules that have come out and stuff with K2, K3 reporting, that can be 5, 6, 10 pages long. And a lot of times I only get the first page.
Oh, wow.
Uh,
Wow.
and so as a CPA that's working with somebody, you got to make sure you get all those pages.
Wow.
The other part too, as you say, there's conflicts. There sometimes are, and one of the things that I'll give you an example of is retirement plans. If you're a physician, so I'll keep that retirement plan theme going. But if you're a physician and you want to put more into a retirement plan because you can, but your practice is saying, no, as a practice, we don't want to do more. A lot of times it's actually illegal for you to go get your own retirement plan and to go fund that more than what the practice is doing. And so that is times where you can be at odds with your practice, and you've got to kind of maybe educate the practice and say, well, why aren't you doing a profit share plan? Why aren't you doing more for your physicians? And so we end up being like an advocate for our client at that point to try to convince the practice to do kind of better for their providers.
Now, I have a question, and this is just out of frustration that I've come across. How do you handle, and again, I'm not a CPA, but I get CPA questions, and I'm just like, please
Yeah.
go to your CPA about this. But stemming back from the provider relief funds that were dumped into a lot of accounts,
Mhm.
which were helpful, but then you had to report it against losses against the COVID.
Yeah.
And there were specifics, as you know, and then, they kept opening windows to report, and there was a lot of providers that just didn't report it
Yeah.
because they were it was going to be, it really wasn't a loan, it was more of a grant, if you will, in my opinion, because they got to keep it when, whatever. But how do you, I don't know, how do you chastise, how do you get, strong arm, how do you say, hey, I've been telling you this forever? Because I mean, I deal with it because I'm on the revenue cycle management side
Yeah.
all the time of physicians. I've been telling you not to document that way. I've been telling you to be more specific, and now they're getting audited. How do you handle that when you're beating your head against the wall and nobody's listening?
So I will say that, you mentioned this like a CPA question, but I think, Terry, what you kind of left out is this is a healthcare specific question that
It is.
as a certified healthcare business consultant and working just with healthcare clients, I know all about provider relief funds and the HHS funds and how to report. And so that's been a good thing. If you were working with a generalist during this time, you may not have even gotten the money. You may not have gotten the full amount of money that you were supposed to or were entitled to, I guess would be the correct term.
That's a good point.
Be,
Didn't even think of that.
yeah, because you were just having to act on your own. And we had clients coming to us and saying, is this the right amount? And we were able to go back and say, no, because, they didn't pay you for this or pay you for that. So let's go back and ask for more money. Um, but to answer the question is, you just have to be patient with clients and work with them. And they're busy just like everyone else is. And when they're, you know, failing to document things or failing to report on time, as at Ide Bailey, we've had enough of these clients, and we've had people that know how to respond to, these notices and work with them. And at a certain point, sometimes you just have to pay it back. And luckily, I haven't had any of my clients or anybody that I'm kind of associated with have to pay the money back. But you just have to be patient with them and talk with them and keep working through some of these issues. And it could be provider relief funds. It could frankly even be making your quarterly estimated tax payments, right, Terry?
Yes.
Nobody likes to do that, but you've
No.
got to like, hey, remember you're supposed to be paying these and you're paying a lot of interest. And so education is a big part of how you convince your clients to kind of go with the program or go with the flow, right?
Yeah, it sounds like it's similar to what I do, but just it sounds like it's just in an accounting setting. So,
Yeah.
just continue to educate, continue to train, continue to say that. So, in your capacity, I know that, part of your background is also looking at buying in and buying out for new doctors that are coming from either other practices or from the hospital setting, or just new doctors that are coming
Mhm.
out of school. Is it an interesting conversation when I know I've had these conversations? It seems to me that some new doctors, maybe not all, kind of come into a new practice and just think there's a windfall of money without really understanding expenses.
Yeah, yeah, hopefully they've been working with the practice for, several years before they get bought in, kind of a trial period. But yeah, there's a big disconnect sometimes between what the actual performance of a practice is and what you're buying in at. And sometimes there's a discrepancy between what the doctors are asking you to buy in at, like the existing doctors want you to pay X, and you're like, that seems kind of high for what I get in return, right? So
Right.
we actually see it on all sides of what should the buy-ins be, what should the buyouts be, how come I'm not making quite as much money as I thought I was. And sometimes the providers are saying, how come you're not making us as much money as we thought you would once you got brought in? So there's a whole host of buy-in and buyout issues that go with every clinic. A lot of them are smooth and pretty easy to deal with, but there are some issues that can pop up where um, expectations just aren't met and they just don't align sometimes.
Well, and I would think that valuations are probably a big part of that, because I'm not saying that practices always overvalue, but I do see that happen.
Yeah. And valuations, so there are different types of valuations where you can get very detailed valuations. And then there's some practices that are small enough that they say, we don't want to go through that expense of getting a full valuation. For instance, right now, I've got a client that's asked me to kind of put together a valuation for a physician they want to buy out. And they're definitely, like you said, they're apart on the prices. They've already kind of said, well, I think it's worth this. And the physician that's getting bought out said, yeah, that seems too low. So they're
Oh,
coming back to us and saying, well, what should it be? How do we come up with those values? Do we look at the hard assets of the company? Do we look at the goodwill of the company? Um, do we look at the net income of the company? And so we're helping them work through that and standardizing their financial statements, because obviously, as a medical group, you've got some things in there that shouldn't be in there. Or maybe your salaries are too low because you're taking out distributions, as from the advice of your tax accountant. Keep your salaries low, take out bigger distributions as an S corporation.
right.
So we're having to normalize those financials and then come back to them and say, okay, well, if everyone is paid correctly, how much net income does the practice actually make? And then that's a different conversation we can have. And I think it's to your side where you said, yeah, my expectation of what I should be getting paid out isn't quite there because I think it's worth a ton, but in reality, it's not worth quite as much as we think it is based off net income.
Right. Well, it's good that you can make that evaluation as well.
Yeah.
Last question, and I'll just kind of wrap it up here. So
Yeah.
I noticed that you are based in Utah. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Does that mean you're only familiar with Utah law, or you have other states that you are familiar with?
No, good question. So as Eide Bailey, we are a Midwest firm, so we have offices in several different locations. I've found that the more I specialize in healthcare, the more people are seeking my services out.
Yeah.
So I have clients now in Oregon, California, Arkansas, Minnesota, right? Like it's starting to expand as people find out that, hey, there's a CPA out there, and I'm not the only one. I hate to say that out loud, but I'm not the only one. There's lots of great CPAs, lots of great CPAs in the NSCHBC that we belong to. But we specialize in healthcare, and I think it's not as important as where you're located, but what kind of value you can bring to the client. So,
Right.
so yeah.
Yeah, I have the same thing. I'm located in California, but I have clients in every single state. So, and you have to know your state because, as you know, states
Yeah.
are crazy.
Yeah, and each state law is different from the CPA side or from the tax world. But we have clients in kind of enough states where you get used to those things. Luckily at Eide Bailey, we probably have an office in that state, so I can go to our California office and say, "Hey, can you teach me a little bit about this, weird thing that you guys have?" And yep, we can teach you about that. So, the rules are a little bit different, but the overall consulting that happens, the overall discussions that happen, those are all pretty standardized from a federal perspective, and then you just get into your state nuance. Um,
Nice.
so
Nice. I appreciate that. Well, thank you very much for attending today, or I should say participating in the podcast today. It's been great having you.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate this opportunity to kind of speak and to talk a little bit about the NSCHBC and what we do as an organization and the people that we bring to this organization. So it's been my pleasure.
Great. To find and contact Shane, you can go to the NSCHBC website at nschbc.org. Click on Find a Consultant, type in his first name Shane, Shane, or his last name Pickett with 2 T's, and his information will appear. Also, as a reminder, nschbc.org website offers monthly free webinars on a variety of topics, as well as a quarterly Medicare regulatory update webinar. Please go to the nschbc.org, click on the tab Upcoming Education. I'll be presenting the fourth quarter Medicare update webinar on December 10th. Also, registration is now open for our winter workshop, Consultants Retreat. Again, go to the nschbc.org to review the agenda and the speakers. That's it for us today, everyone. Make it a great day, a great rest of your month, and thank you for listening to the award-winning NSCHBC Edge podcast. I'm your host, Terry Fletcher.
Thank you for listening to the NSCHBC Edge podcast. Join us on the second Tuesday of each month as our consultants tackle the complexities of navigating the business of medicine. You can reach us on the web at nschbc.org, the National Society of Certified Healthcare Business Consultants.